What's going on, guys? This is Diggs DIY, home of the longest lasting Cavalier project. And today I'm going to show you guys how to drop a rusty subframe out of your unibody car. Now if you guys enjoy this video, go ahead and drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more fixes just like this. Okay guys, I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of the 6 bolt locations that you're going to need to take out to remove the subframe from the body of the car. And then I'm going to end up dropping out the steering rack as well, but if you're not, you need to take those 2 bolts that I just showed you out also. And then I'll also need to knock out the ball joints to the tie rods and then the lower ball joints to the steering knuckles. And then I had to remove the steering rack because one of the nuts that holds the rack to the subframe actually rusted out on the side. You can see that right there. That's supposed to be, I don't know, welded on or attached to the subframe, and it's just completely rusted out. So that bolt was just turning in place and there was no other way for me to get it out. So I had to drop the steering rack with the frame, but that's not the end of the world. So here's the subframe on the vehicle itself. You need to remove the outermost and innermost bolts that I'm pointing to right here on either side of the vehicle. So you'll just want to start by removing the first 2 that I showed, and then we'll save those last 2 in the tower once you've got your subframe supported like this. So I just used a piece of plywood, put it under the subframe, and then cranked it up with my jack, and then everything's kind of in place and ready to take out. Obviously my engine is out, so I have the ability to use a breaker bar and to kind of get to these bolts without too much trouble. If your engine is still in, this is going to be a lot harder. You're going to need to do it from the bottom. But right now I'm trying to get that little bolt out of the steering rack, and this is the one that ends up kind of rotting out and spinning on me. So I'm going to go ahead and decide just to keep the steering rack in there. But if you were going to remove yours, you're going to want to take that bolt out and then the second bolt here, which I shoot with the gun, to get out. And then since I'm taking out my steering rack, I need to release this little bolt which holds the steering rack to the steering column. So you can just pull up on that boot and then kind of just crank that out. It comes out pretty easily. Okay, since I'm dropping my steering rack, I need to go ahead and remove these lines for the steering fluid. There's going to be, I believe, 2 of them. And I'm just using a crescent wrench here and being careful not to strip those, I don't know what you would call them, it's a nut, but that attaches the lines to the rack. So just be really careful with those. Then once you've got that done, you can go ahead and drop this last bolt. This is one of the first 6, but I'm gonna actually show how you kind of get access to it here. And this is in this like kind of tower thing in the subframe, and that attaches to the body of the vehicle, sort of in that engine bay area. So there's going to be one of these on either side. You just need to go ahead and crank out. Okay, next we are going to remove the tie rods from the knuckles. So there's going to be 1 cotter pin on either side that kind of runs through the threading on the ball joint. So go ahead and remove those by any means possible. These are really rusted out, so I'm kind of just cranking on them, twisting them, doing all sorts of things to break it, and then I'll put new cotter pins in when I reinstall with some less rusty components. But generally those will come out. You just need to keep working at them. Okay, and then once you've got your cotter pins out, you're going to work on removing this nut on the ball joint. So once you've got that out, I'm going to go ahead and spray that thread with rust penetrant, because getting those ball joints out is kind of a pain in the butt, detaching those from the knuckles. So go ahead and spray those down, and then I'll move to the other side. Now this is the cotter pin that holds to the lower ball joint on the steering knuckle. It's kind of an awkward angle to get your camera in there and work on, but this is what you need to remove. Then in the next shot, I'll just be cranking on that nut. Okay, here is my socket wrench set up on the nut for the lower ball joint. I'm gonna go ahead and crank that off, do the other side, and then we'll move forward. Okay, so there's this additional sort of cross member bar thing that attaches the K-frame to the front end of the vehicle. So there's 2 nuts you can take off here. Really, you only need to remove 1, and I'm going to go ahead and take that out right now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and try to knock these ball joints out now before finally dropping the frame. So I've been letting these sit with a little bit of rust penetrant for a while now, and I'm kind of just hitting on the bottom of that thread of the ball joint. I can afford to be a little bit less careful because all this stuff is getting replaced on my vehicle. And if your components aren't as rusty and you're going to keep them, that should hopefully make removing them a little bit easier than mine were. So I'm going to go ahead and try to knock at this bottom ball joint as well also, and knock that out of the bottom of the knuckle. This one was really kind of difficult to work on, but I ended up getting it out with just a large hammer. Okay, so now that all the hardware, nuts and bolts and all that stuff is removed, we can actually work on dropping the frame out of the vehicle. So this is sort of a process that takes a little bit of time. You kind of slowly drop the frame, remove things that are in the way, drop the frame a little bit more, remove things that are in the way, and just keep repeating that process until you're all the way through. There might be brake lines, that exhaust pipe is kind of in the way, just different things like that. But really the ones you want to be careful for are lines and then any electrical wires that are hanging out of the bottom of that subframe. You really don't want to drop your subframe out with anything else attached or under it, because that's an easy way to break something. So just slowly but surely on this. Really, I just got mine jacked up at one point, which probably isn't the best way to do it. But sort of like I said, most of this stuff's getting replaced anyway, so I'm not too worried about dropping it out too quickly. And the one thing I just showed you guys there, that connects your steering column to the steering rack. So just go ahead and make sure that that connection is sort of undone before dropping it out further. You don't want to break anything there. So here it is. It's just the same process, just kind of slowly drop it out. Okay, so I'm going to drop it down so that the wood sits right on 2 rollers, and I'm going to end up just rolling the subframe out through the wheel well because that's where I have the most clearance. If you're going to roll it out any other way, it's going to be really tough unless you have your vehicle jacked up really high. So unless you just drop it down and kind of drag it through the dirt or whatever to get it out, I suggest doing what I did. So here's sort of that whole subframe assembly dropped out, and then like I said, I'm just going to roll it over through the right wheel well. So there is the whole subframe removed from the car. At this point, you guys are pretty much done. And if this video helped you out, consider dropping a like or subscribing to my channel. I'll be doing an engine swap on the Cavalier here and have plenty of content to come in the coming months. Thanks so much.